Good evening. Thanks so much to everyone for being here tonight. My name is Annie Atura. I'm the executive director of the Center for Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity, or what we like to call CCSRE. As you see, we've received an outpouring of interest in tonight's speaker, and we are so grateful to each of you for being here tonight. Before we begin, I'd like to offer our heartfelt thanks to some of the people who made tonight possible. First, to Anne and Loren Kieve, who are sitting right here in the front row. For 20 years now, 20, Anne and Loren have generously supported this annual lecture, which has become one of CCSRE's most impactful public-facing programs. We're so thrilled that they can be here tonight, and we're endlessly grateful for their support. We'll hear briefly from Loren at the end of the program. CCSRE would also like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our generous co-sponsors who've helped to gather us all together. They are Native American Studies, with special thanks to Professor Teresa Laframboise, the Creative Writing Program, Stanford Arts, the Institute for Advancing Just Societies, the Bill Lane Center for the American West, the Department of English, Public Humanities, the American Studies Program, the Division of Literatures, Cultures, and Languages, the Institute for Diversity in the Arts, and Modern Thought and Literature. So you can just tell from that list how much effort it took to pull this all together. Last but not least, I want to acknowledge the staff of the Faculty Club. We give them a hand. They make this all possible, and of course, the staff of CCSRE for the time and the true heart they've poured into programming that serves our communities. Professor Teresa Laframboise, Director of Native American Studies, will introduce our speaker, but first, I'm pleased to invite Demetrius Brown, the Native American Studies undergraduate liaison at CCSRE, to offer a land acknowledgement.
Thank you. How Midakuye. I'm first going to do my introduction in Lakota. It's tradition for us to introduce ourselves in our own language first. So, how Midakuye na kolapi on petu do bukinle chante washte na pe choose apielo, Demetrius Brown amachi apielo na lakho me chaji king wambli ishnala yellow. Lemekoche king mwekwa olone oyate tchawapi, chan petu wicha kinle unkikshu apielo. Pine Ridge, Hemachatahan, na Oyuchpe Tioshpae Hematahan. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Demetrius Brown, and I greet you all with good heart. I'm a sophomore here at Stanford and a member of the Ogallala Lakota Nation. Today, we must gather in community and acknowledge and appreciate the Muwekma Ohlone people and their history upon this land before it was taken from them. The Muwekma Ohlone people have a rich history before the arrival of colonizers, and they continue to be a thriving community fighting for their rights to their land and the right to be considered a sovereign nation. Both they undoubtedly deserve. It is vastly important we recognize that Stanford was built on the Muwekma Ohlone land whilst the Muwekma Ohlone people were still being oppressed by multiple colonizing forces. It is also equally important we understand that Stanford still benefits from the brutal colonization of California's indigenous communities to this day. This land was, is, and will always belong to the Muwekma Ohlone people. And it is our responsibility as guests to this land to respect and support the Ohlone people and their journey towards sovereignty. Pilami apelo. Thank you all.
Good evening. I'm Teresa Laframboise, as Annie said, the director of the Native American Studies program. I'm also really excited for Native American Studies to be able to co-sponsor the 20th annual Anne and Loren Kieve Distinguished Lecture and to be able to introduce our distinguished speaker this evening. Before I introduce our speaker, let me just briefly, believe me, it's briefly, explain about the Native American Studies program, its activities, and its goals. Since becoming a full-fledged academic program in 1997, Native American Studies has emphasized scholarship and ethical engagement rooted in Indigenous ways of knowing. It strives to provide Stanford students with learning opportunities that help strengthen the life circumstances of Native communities, their families, and themselves. The Native American Studies program thrives because of the contributions of many dedicated scholars, activists, and allies who support the program and offer an array of courses, such as Introduction to Native American History, Native American Creative Writing, Decolonizing Language in the Indigenous Classroom, Entrepreneurship for Social and Racial Equity, Tribal Food Sovereignty, and the Cultural Heritage and Muwekma Traditional Knowledge Native Plant Garden Project. Those are just a few, but they're the ones that we're doing now. Now to tell and introduce our distinguished speaker, Mr. Tommy Orange. Tommy was born and raised in Oakland, California. He's an enrolled member of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes of Oklahoma. He graduated from the Masters of Fine Arts program at the Institute for American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Tommy is a 2014 McDowell Fellow and a 2016 Writing by Writers Fellow. His debut album, There, was a 2019 American Book Award winner and a finalist for the 2019 Pulitzer Prize. It also won the Penn Hemingway Award and the John Leonard Prize that year. There appeared on countless Best Books of the Year lists, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR, Time, the Oprah Magazine, GQ, Entertainment Weekly, and BuzzFeed. Tommy's second novel, Wandering Stars, published this year, has already garnered much praise and hopefully will attain the There, Like, and Beyond notoriety. Native American author Louise Erdrich, in her tribute to Wandering Stars, congratulated Tommy by saying, "No one knows how to express tenderness and yearning like Tommy Orange. With an all-seeing heart, he traces historical and contemporary cruelties, vagaries, salvations, and solutions visited upon the Cheyenne people who cope with the impossible. In them, Tommy finds the unnerving strength that results when a broken spirit mends itself, when a wandering star finds its place, when despite everything, Native people manage to survive." Tommy's reflections on his thoughts concerning pretending in American history suggests we are in for a profound cultural lesson on Native American life this evening. Please join me in welcoming Tommy Orange.
Thank you, Therese. I'm going to have my phone out to pay attention to time, and I'm also going to read from it. Sorry I didn't print pages. I know that's probably more professional. The last time I was here, I finished some storytelling work that I did through a colleague, Virgil Moorhead, a Yurok guy that I worked with at the Native American Health Center. He brought me in because he was working with students, Native students here, and it was much needed contract money. We drove in from 2 hours away, living in a mountain town called Copperopolis, because I needed the work, and our car broke down on the Dumbarton Bridge on the way home. We had to stay at a loft hotel just across the way, and had my niece with us and my son, and a robot served us Coca-Colas in our room, and it was special. But those were hard times. So it's good to be back. My great uncle who lived in Modesto just passed away 4 years ago. He played basketball here. He went to Stanford, so he was a diehard for Stanford. And his brother, my grandpa, went to Cal, so there was a lot of beef in the family. So I am not good at lecturing, and it makes me uncomfortable to think about lecturing, but I'm sort of finding my way to do something that doesn't bore people. I think I have undiagnosed ADHD. Whenever I hear somebody talking for more than like 10 minutes, my brain like just goes somewhere else. And I hope that doesn't happen to you all while I talk. Um, if I just stare at my phone and read a thing, I know that's not interesting. So I'll try to stay away from the phone. It's my safety net in case it feels like what's coming out of my mouth, it sounds foolish or is not capturing you all. Then my safety net is where I'll go and read something and bore you guys. Um, it's good to see an old friend. I haven't seen him, I guess, in a couple years. I don't know if he ducked out. Sterling, are you out there? I was thinking about pretending, and there is a history that I'll talk about, but I wanted to tell this story. He's from Montana. This is the last time I saw him, um, and I was thinking about my story as a writer and how I think a lot of writers have to start out pretending that they're writers. Um, Obviously, we're going to dig into some of the pretendian material, sort of implied in the title, probably. Um, but the first sort of like thing that happened to me for writing happened in Montana. I quit my job um, and moved to Oregon because I could. Somebody on Craigslist was advertising an artist commune, and I got a This is when Craigslist was safe and legit. And I got a ride up there also through Craigslist, and I get dropped off, and there's no going back at this point because the person has somewhere else to go further north. And this is supposed to be a hippie commune, like an artist commune. Emblazoned on the side of the door is Jesus, like in flames, just carved in wood. And I'm like, this is not a hippie commune. And there was no other people there. It was just this crazy woman named Bernie. And and like after a few weeks, like she introduced me to the daughter, and it was like implied that something was gonna. It was very weird. Um, so I stayed in my room and I wrote, and that was probably for the best. So it worked out. And I applied to this artist in residency thing in Montana, and I got in, and that felt like a huge moment. I was writing this really weird story about a disturbed kid in a closet who was very interested in shadow boxes, which are like panorama things where you look into diorama, not panorama. Um, and he kept referencing an old war, not worth going into. There's no trace of this work anymore. But it got me into this residency, and this was for Native writers. And I spent, and I swear there's a theme I'm going to pull a thread on here. On pretending, I tried to write a novel for the first time there. I haven't told very many people this because it was a huge failure. I had 30 days, and I didn't have a family yet. And it's a lot of time to just write. Um, but I didn't yet know what I was going to write the novel about, and I didn't know what being a Native writer even meant. Um, I'd been working in the Native community in Oakland plenty of years. I knew all of the same history pretty much that I would end up writing about, but I didn't know that that's what I was going to end up writing about. So I wrote 30 pages of a story about a kid who's from the city who goes back to Oklahoma for a funeral. And you really spend a lot of time, probably way too much time, in the kid's head. And this annoying thing that I think a lot of writers do that they don't know that they're doing, where they talk about the floaties in their eyes. I've just noticed. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but it comes up in like people. I think people think they're being very literary when they do it. I think I was doing that. Um, and I was sort of pretending to be a writer and pretending to know what it meant to be a Native writer. Um, and this Crow guy, Cheyennes and Crows have not historically got along. He was like 6'6", way into Lord of the Rings, um, and a very talented painter. and like super traditional. Like all the details in his paintings were like historically perfect. Um, and we're all going to go to Butte together on just to see Butte, and we're all sort of waiting for a ride. And he looks at me and he says, "I guess they're just letting anyone in now, huh?" He's talking about how I don't look native to him, and I just like shrunk and dissolved. And I finished that residency, and I had these 30 pages, and absolutely nothing happened with them. And that was 2009, and I wouldn't start writing there until the beginning of 2012. Um, and I don't know what made the difference and what made me lean into writing the urban native story, except for the fact that uh, the absence, I think, at some point became too much. Um, and between those years, I ended up working with Native youth and doing certain programming that made me feel the lacking representation was harmful. And then I found out I was going to be a father, and that's really what sort of jump started writing there. And I'm not going to go into the story of There or even Wandering Stars. Those two books were totally life changing, and um, I had to pretend to know what I was doing when I first started getting up in front of people and talking about being a writer. Um, and I guess let's just flash forward to, because I want to talk about the new book. Um, I was in Phoenix running on a treadmill at the Gila River Indian Casino, and I was listening to R.F. Kuang's book Yellowface um, audiobook. And I had been playing with the idea of writing a parody of The Education of Little Tree. Do you all know that book? Do people love that book in here? Anybody? Do people know the truth of the author of that book? Okay, so it's sort of known, and it was known for many years that the author of the book, who claims to be Cherokee, was a former KKK member, and he was the speechwriter for George Wallace, who said segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And the right wing wasn't right enough for him, so he left politics and came back as a Cherokee person. Um, and first wrote The Outlaw Josie Wales, and Clint Eastwood adapted it. And he even wrote a biography on Geronimo, weirdly. And he wrote The Education of Little Tree shortly before he died. And it became this very beloved Native book. It was the only book a librarian ever gave me, because she knew I was Native, and she was like, "Here's, a book that was written by a Native person." And I didn't like the book. I didn't know he wasn't Cherokee. I just didn't particularly like it when I tried, but I wasn't a reader as a kid anyway. Um, so I was going to write this parody um, where a Native kid ends up adopted by an older white couple, and we sort of explore white culture in the same way that he did for the kid in Education of Little Tree. And I started writing that book, and I guess we'll jump back to Gila River Casino, treadmill, Yellowface, and the idea. This is similar to what happened with There. The idea for the whole book sort of popped into my head, um, and it was essentially, what if somebody like you, like me, uh, sort of rose to prominence as an author, as a Native author, and then found out that they weren't Native. And I thought that that's way more interesting than the parody, and way more complex. And I think novels were made to chew on complex subjects and to explore them. And within a month, I sold that book, and I was calling it The Pretendians then. It has a different name now. And it happened to be right when we found out that Buffy St. Marie is not. I don't know if people in here disagree with that. Um, I don't see many Native people in the Native world putting up a fight. It seems everybody agrees that it's over for her. So this whole novel sort of started happening where you are introduced to this prominent Native author who wrote, um, he ended up writing the book that I was trying to write before. And weirdly, PBS, at the same time I sold the book and was starting to really dig into the idea of sort of parodying myself in a way, as if, what if I found out I wasn't? I'm not afraid of that happening, but um, PBS asked me to come on this show where they test your DNA and they like fully dig into your mom and dad's histories, and so it was just kind of a weird coincidence. Um, in the book, the main character has a podcast, and so he's part of a podcast network, and one of the podcasts in the network is a comedy podcast where they test your DNA, and it's all Native people, and they sort of talk about what small percentages of whiteness you have and sort of exotify them in a sort of a reversal of um, and he does that, and he finds out that he's not, and he's going on this story that his dad was this Native musician, guitarist guy. His mom had a one night stand. Anyway, I'm going to read a little bit from that right now. Um, and I'm sort of just in the middle of writing the book, and I sold it at the end of 2023. I'm putting together a short story that's from it that I'm trying to make self-contained, but also trying to finish the whole thing within the next couple of months. Ben North woke up at sunrise and jogged the dog beneath blue and peach light, listened to music to get him going. A song's refrain, is it new or is it ancient? He listened to it twice. Got to a trailhead and saw a dog walker with maybe 10 dogs in her orbit, so turned around. His dog did not like other dogs, barked at them viciously and pretended to want to lunge at them like a friend at a bar, not wanting to fight, pleading, hold me back. Tracker, he'd scream whisper. Tracker was the dog's name. Tracker, no. And he'd pretend to be madder than he was if anyone was around, like they'd been training for this very moment for countless hours at home, and he couldn't believe Tracker was letting him down. On the way back, Ben listened to a podcast about German barbarians. Felt there were so many layers to understand. The idea alone that blonde-haired, blue-eyed, war-painted German barbarians contributed to the fall of Rome, for example. The podcast host talked about how the word barbarian came from the Greek and originally meant how anyone who didn't speak Greek sounded to them like bar, bar, bar. A meme about how often men thought about the Roman Empire had just started trending again. The Roman Empire is not what brought him to the podcast, but Ben understood the optics. He was a man listening to a podcast about, yes, the German barbarians, but only insofar as how it related to the Roman Empire. He himself had a successful podcast, was on a podcast network with ads, but podcasting was just what he was doing while trying to come up with his next book. His next book was why he was listening to the podcast about the German barbarians. Everything, it seemed at this point in his life, leaned on a thing that leaned on a thing that he felt could topple at any moment. It was just a feeling, but an especially strong one at certain hours of the night when he woke and couldn't get back to sleep, or when he'd had too much caffeine and not enough to do. Ben ate with his family in the breakfast nook they hardly ever used anymore. His wife Bev made eggs her way, sunny side down. Their 4-year-old daughter Beatrix refused the eggs, then refused toast because it was a little burnt, then said ew about oatmeal her mom made while Ben tried to scrape the burn off the toast. Finally, Beatrix settled on a mashed up banana in a bowl, an old staple they called monkey food. Tracker lay in a slanted square of light, looking up now and then to check for fallen food. Ben stared at the dog, thought about wolves. about what dogs maybe used to be. He thought about the Netflix show he'd just finished about the German barbarians, their love of wolves, the Roman myth about wolves raising the sons of Mars, the god of war. Did this mean he was thinking about the Roman Empire again? Bev noticed Ben lost in thought and tapped his shin with her foot under the table. Ben flinched and ducked down for a bite of the runny eggs. Taking Beatrix to school and dropping her off was new and hard. She had questions about why she had to go to school that they couldn't answer in a way that satisfied her. It's important that you learn, Ben said. Why? She asked. It's what we're here to do in life, Ben said. How do you know? Beatrix asked. Bev said knock knock, to which Beatrix could not ask who's there. Peacock, Bev said. Ben hadn't heard this one. Beatrix sat thinking. She had insisted she get to wear her Pikachu pajamas to school that morning. When Beatrix heard herself say Pikachu, she laughed and forgot about her question. Sometimes Ben called his wife B, and she called him B back, and it was a cute thing they did no one else would think was cute. They also called Beatrix B, and she called them B, so when they dropped Beatrix off at school, they were all like, bye, B, okay, bye, B, love you, B, see you after school, B, ad nauseum. There were countless weird things people did with names and with language they would never want anyone knowing about, like the way their dog's name was Tracker, but they called him Mr. T, and Trax, and T-Rex meant to be like T-Rex, and T-Bird, and inexplicably Tron, and basically anything but Tracker, which was just the name he came with when they rescued him from the pound. Ben wondered if this was where language first came from, the spontaneously nicknaming that which you love for fun. Beatrix would have been Beatrice, named after Bev's recently deceased grandmother, but Bev had carried then lost boy they named Alex to a seven-month term 2 years before Beatrix was born. Bev didn't lose the boy. Alex was theirs to have and lose together. They put the X at the end of their daughter's name in tribute to him. The aftermath of the miscarriage nearly broke them, but when Bev got pregnant again, everything felt possible. Beatrix liked to play this game where she posed a scenario that always started with pretend like. Over time, it turned into sounding more like 10 like. So she'd be like, 10 like we know how to fly, but choose not to. Or 10 like we're underwater and only get one big breath every 30 seconds. Or 10 like we can only move in slow motion. Or 10 like we're on a bus and everyone's a dog and I'm a cat and I'm scared, but you protect me. It hurt to love someone so small and vulnerable. And the love came with so much worry about her getting hurt by falling or having things fall on her, getting struck by a speeding car, shot by a sudden gunman. But constantly worrying about her was as useless as it was inevitable. And that was what love was too. I'll stop right there. So I sort of spoiled the character by telling you find out that he's not native. That maybe will ruin the reading experience because you're supposed to go into it sort of like not knowing that you're going to find out. I don't know why I told you guys that. I was asked to pick a title for the lecture, and this sort of ruined me thinking about the lecture because I'm trying to find ways to send home the pretending thing. And I spent a lot of time writing a lecture that I was just going to read. And I realized that I was just trying to rewrite the first chapter of Philip Deloria's book, Playing Indian, which you all should read. It's a really excellent book. And the history of Americans pretending to be natives, as crazy as it is now with Buffy and like as many professors there are here and in Canada, it's been going on for a really long time. You know, if you break it down by century, like there was crazy stuff going on. So have you all heard of Thomas Morton? He wrote something called The New English Canaan, very sympathetic to Native people and very anti-colonial. And his book was, I guess, probably the first banned book in America. and he sort of hung out with natives and did weird maypole stuff, and like stuff they would call pagan. Um, there was there was not exactly pretendians then, but there was a religious pluralism at the time that was a lot more fluid than we like to think of those times. And the Boston Tea Party, which is part of the way they teach history, is like one of the staples of the American Revolution. Playing Indian was a vital part of the beginning of American identity. They weren't dressed up as Mohawks just because they wanted to disguise themselves. They could have just wrapped their heads in, scarves. It was because they wanted to think they belonged to this country. And dressing up as natives was a way to separate themselves from the British, dumping tea out, obviously, as British culture. This is all like vital American identity stuff. That as we move into the 1800s, um, it was a pretty brutal century for Native people, and basically no one was pretending that for that time period. It was Civil War and lots of massacres, the Buffalo Wars. Um, and then when we get to the to the 1900s and film and television, immediately we're already starting to dress up to look more Indian than we actually are. And and we sort of get frozen there. Our first TV show that was made by us and had a showrunner and camera people and a writing room came out in 2021. In 1911, um, it might have been 1920, but somewhere in 100 years ago, there was a committee put together against the misrepresentation of Native images in film. Jim Thorpe was on this committee. I think some kind of organization like it still exists today. Um, but at first, it was because of the way they were playing up the idea of us, sort of as either too happy or the vanishing race, all sorts of you know distortions of who we are. And there was never a correction. As you move forward into film history, uh, the Italians came, and those were the natives that we saw, and that went all the way to the 70s. So basically, pretendians after that moved to academia and Coachella concerts. And I'm including this sort of timeline because I promised an American history in the title, and I thought a lot about it. But the novel that I'm in the middle of trying to finish is sort of tackling American identity, but also what this pretendian thing is all about, and trying to think through the way somebody who didn't mean to be a pretendian comes back from it, possibly on a podcast. And that's sort of one of the central things happening in the book as well. I could read something else from my phone, but I think we're at time now. So thank you all for your attention.
So let me take just a minute to introduce myself. My name is Paula Moya. I'm the faculty director for the Center for Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity. And I'm so pleased to have Tommy Orange here to give us a little preview of the novel that is coming. So you don't have quite a title of it just yet?
I don't. I'd rather not say.
Okay, that's fine. I understand that. That's perfectly fine. But thank you for reading from it and giving us a sense of more or less what is going to happen. I have a series of questions that I'm going to ask Tommy Orange before we take off. And so I'm going to start by saying that I had no idea that Buffy St. Marie wasn't native. So now I know something that I didn't know before. It has been quite shocking to me, actually, to find out how many academics actually have been pretending to be Native American, and how that there's a real disjuncture between what people from the Native community know about people versus what people who are outside that community find out, like after the fact, and also how many of them sort of get exposed and then just keep moving along. So we have seen that in academia as well.
There's a chilling clip of Buffy on Sesame Street from the 70s where she's asking one of the kids, and then one of the kids is like, "Are you a real Indian?" And she's like, "What do you think? I'm a fake?" It's like knowing everything now. It's worth watching.
Well, good. We'll take a look at it. So I have a number of questions. I'm not going to ask you too much about the work that's coming out because I haven't had a chance to read it myself, but I do have some other questions about your previous novels. So if you don't mind, I will go ahead and ask you about your latest novel, Wandering Stars. So in that novel, the title of that novel, Wandering Stars, is taken from the King James Bible's version of chapter 1, verse 13 of the book of Jude. And the opening character in that novel, Jude Starr, chooses for himself a name that references both the book of Jude and that specific verse. So I'm just wondering, what is the importance to you of that passage? And I know that in some of your interviews, you've talked about your mother's Christianity, and also the image of the wandering stars.
So, as much time as I did spend at the back of the Bible, because I grew up evangelical Christian, and the church talked about the end of the world a lot. So I read Revelations a lot, sort of looking for the signs to know when to like repent and get Jesus into my heart as fast as I could, so I wouldn't go to hell forever. Um, I didn't actually know about Jude. I was reading the last book. Um, it came to me through Portishead, which maybe other people probably know it from. Um, it's kind of an obnoxious way to think of a book, the story I'm about to tell, but I'm just being honest. I was signing books in a warehouse, a Penguin Random House uh, warehouse north of Baltimore, and the team of people that were passing me the books to sign played a Spotify playlist with the Root as "They're There" by Radiohead. And for whatever reason, and this part I still don't understand. Um, the Portishead song that I knew "Wandering Star." Um, it came on, this was March 2018. This was before There came out. I immediately knew I was going to write a sequel, and that I was going to call it "Wandering Stars." I don't know why I knew that. This is the part that's mysterious. Um, at the time, and I wrote into that for a year, a straightforward sequel that came. That happened right after the aftermath of the powwow at the end of the first book. Um, and then I was in Sweden a year later and saw a newspaper clipping at a museum and fell down this rabbit hole having to do with Fort Marion. And the origin story of boarding schools basically started at a Florida prison castle run by Richard Henry Pratt. Um, so I wanted to try to find a way to get this history, which half of the prisoners were Southern Cheyennes, and that's what I am. I'm Southern Cheyenne. Um, and I didn't know how I would get it in there. Eventually found out that one of the prisoners' names was Star. Um, the prison castle itself was shaped like a star, and so things started to happen that made the title that I had chosen make sense. Um, and I found out that Star, who was a bread maker, w- went back to Oklahoma, to El Reno area, and became the chief of police. And that a lot of people became Christians. And I don't remember when I probably just Googled the lyrics to Wandering Star by Portishead, and the Bible verse came up, and all of a sudden I realized I was going to be able to write about Christianity from the perspective of Native people when they first came across it. And that seemed really interesting to me because mostly I have a lot of bitterness and harsh feelings toward being raised like I wasn't going to reach adulthood because the end of the world was coming. Um, and it was an intense sort of religious upbringing that was not fun. And to write about a lot of those feelings from this other place where I could really get at um, the foreignness of Christianity from an outside perspective was really interesting. And so um, that's where when I found it in the Bible, it sort of opened up this idea of exploring Christianity from a native perspective, from people who have a creation story that actually has similarities to the Jesus story, and that's just a real Cheyenne story that happens to be that predates contact.
Thank you. That's really interesting, and it's interesting to know how you came to that. So I'm going to ask you another question that I'd like you to speak a little bit about the importance of either of prologues or of epigraphs in the writing of your 2 novels. Okay, so you can choose prologues, you can choose epigraphs. So how does a prologue allow you to convey information to your readers about the history of Native Americans or even the experience of being Native American that might otherwise be hard to convey? So that's you have prologues in both There and Wandering Stars that do that. Or how might an epigraph allow you to direct your reader's interpretation of a novel? And so, I mean, you have so many amazing epigraphs in There, and I'm sure also in Wandering Stars. But I was thinking of that Bertolt Brecht one that starts the prologue. In the dark times, will there also be singing? Yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. So either one of those or both.
I feel like the epigraphs are like the fun part when like you understand what the book is doing enough to choose sort of tonal matter that will help uh, sort of at the doorway of the novel. You can tell the reader tonally what they're entering into, and that's like you're using somebody else's words to help you, and
Mhm.
that's a lot more fun than trying to figure out your own words.
Right.
So that I feel like epigraphs are the fun part, and I don't have some extensive knowledge of Bertolt Brecht's words. Um, I don't even know how I found that quote, but it fit. I knew that it fit perfectly with the tone I wanted to set at the very beginning. And the novel like begins and ends in a way with singing if you count the epigraph, um, and birds singing at the end of the novel. Um, the prologue it was called the book was largely sold um, through the prologue. They printed out like thousands of pamphlets of the prologue. This was directly after Standing Rock and right when Trump was president the first time. Um, my agent, who wasn't my agent then, was sent my manuscript from a teacher from my writing program, and she was up with anxiety at 4 in the morning because of the Muslim ban, reading the prologue,
Mhm.
and felt like what I was doing was resisting this idea of America being great at one time. Um, and the success of the book was largely related to its timing. Um, and But I never wrote the prologue as like I want to tell people this information because I don't want my characters to have to say it at some point organically. Um, I didn't know what it was, and I didn't really have a model. Um, I didn't know. I knew prologues could sort of do whatever they wanted, and that was my appeal. You could sort of do whatever you want in a prologue. A lot of people skip the prologue because the story really starts after the prologue, and so I liked the idea that it was malleable and you could do what you wanted. Um, and I put I people called it an essay afterward. And if I thought I was writing an essay when I was writing it, I never would have written it because I don't like writing nonfiction.
Mhm.
Um, so if I'm writing nonfiction, I have to think of it as fiction. If I think I'm going to try to do it well, um, so there's a lot of interesting history, and I like the idea of sort of moving through history and using language in ways that conveys some of the themes from the whole book. The prologue for there was originally 15 pages, and my editor was like, it can't be that long. And the way we got an interlude was I cut it in half and put the other half in the middle, and so I was like, now we have an interlude. So it takes some of the like magic and creation out of it, and like me masterminding the structure. It's not exactly how it happened.
Okay, thank you. So I want to move to this issue of residential boarding schools, so which is a big issue in Wandering Stars. So over the last few years, there's been a real reckoning with the dark history and lasting effects of these Native American residential boarding schools, which you do address in Wandering Stars. Just this past November, President Joe Biden formally apologized for the role of the United States government in running the schools and referred to our country's involvement as a blot on American history. So I'm just wondering what you think about. I mean, obviously, Wandering Stars came out before that. What you think of this emerging public narrative? Do you think it was adequate to the lived experience of the impact of the schools?
No, it was really sad. It was a really sad apology. I think at one point he was like, I am very, very, very sorry. Like he couldn't compose a better apology. It's like it's a very Trump way to accentuate something lazy. Like it's not sincere. I was invited to that, but I was getting so many emails from political emails that it got lost. And then Deb Holland, who came to one of my events on the Wandering Stars tour, um, we text now because she came to the event and like we became friends. She texted me the day of. She was like, "Are you here?" And then I went through my email and found the official White House invitation. Um, and then later watched the clip of Biden apologizing on YouTube, and it's just it it wasn't surprising that it was a lazy apology, but it's disappointing. To all this time have this history not be talked about, not be taught, not be discussed, not be included in what American history is and what the way this country has treated Native people. To have this sort of like half-assed thing happen was, it was sad. Um, I think there's a lot of good work happening. Julian Brave Noise Cat, who's also from Oakland, was just nominated for Academy Award for a documentary called Sugarcane that you should all watch, and it's a very personal film about his family, his involvement at a residential school in Canada. But it's the same story, and I think there's a lot yet to do and to chew on and understand about the damage that did. And Native people understand it, but there's a lot that history has left out that sometimes it's hard to conjure the energy right now, what we're facing. Like we're gonna get revisions in history and the way we think about it, like at the beginning of this 4 years, that could just be like who knows how many years, the end, etc. So I'm sorry if I lost my spark
Oh,
for a
no,
second
that's
there.
fine. I mean, it's a difficult issue, and so let me ask you this: how do you understand the relationship between the act of writing, so what you do, and historical memory? So, because this, in a way, you're writing about the residential boarding schools is one window or one way of starting to address that issue, which you then tied in a way that I found very helpful for my knowledge to Richard Henry Pratt's prison, the Star Prison. So, can you have in the Wandering Stars there's a narrative written by Charles Starr that is then saved for, they say Opal Viola, Victoria Bearshield. So, can you talk about that relationship?
Yeah, I had never written any historical fiction before, and it was when I realized how daunting that was. It was at first intimidating, and I did like way more research than I needed to do to tell myself I was still working. Um, and I just read books from that time period to try to get an understanding of what it was like. I think my dad grew up in Oklahoma. His first language was Cheyenne. Grew up with his grandparents, not with his parents, um, and grew up, learning a lot of the old ways that even people in his generation didn't learn because he grew up with his grandparents and his great grandparents. But he had a lot of wounds because his parents didn't accept him. Um, and because he kind of lived a wild life, um, that when he moved to Oakland with my mom and raised us, he thought through reticence he could protect us from it. Um, and so there was a lot of unspoken emotional content that was being transmitted to me. This is what I think of with historical memory. Um, there were things that were passed down, and he's talked a lot more as he's gotten older. And so a lot of the emotional weight that I felt having him as a dad in the house, um, all made sense once I knew more information. So when it came to imagining these lives as fictional characters, I think there was a similar thing that I did as a kid to fill in why things felt this way, that I had to fill in with my imagination, that I then something felt familiar about it when it came to writing fictional characters and thinking about what gets transmitted even when it doesn't. Um, and how to render fictional characters for the reader to make them do the same imaginative and emotional leaps to believe in the story that they're reading.
Mhm. Thank you. So, let me ask you a final question as we get nearer the end of this session here. So, let me just ask you this, and this goes back to the reference you made to the fact that we've got 4 years now, at least, of a new administration. So, the question is, how do you maintain hope? You know, as an artist in the writing of a book, but also just living in these times of environmental breakdown, political mendacity, of attacks on immigrants and DEI and Native communities.
I mean, I think Native people have survived a lot worse. That's helpful to know. Um, I have a 2-year-old and a 13-year-old. I sort of have to have hope because they're inheriting a different world than the one I inherited. Um, I think continuing to create and make art and believe in art is important to maintain hope. Um, but it's hard, it's not on some kind of like continual wave or thread of hope that I can sort of always remember. It's there's really dark stuff happening in the government for the earth for a lot of marginalized people, and it's just going to get worse. But I do believe that art that exists in uncomfortable times um, can rise to the occasion, and there's hope in that. I think art that comes out of things being great and comfortable, that's not where great art comes from. So not only as an artist believing that I could try to rise to the occasion, but also being hopeful that what people have to dig deep from themselves to help each other, that there's hope in believing that we'll do that, and that transcends art. That's just like if we have to dig as deep as we need to dig to save ourselves, if that's being asked of us, um, I you have to hope that we can, um, and I hold on to that.
And so, is the act of writing for you a very much part of that then?
It's miserable a lot of the time. It's really, sometimes you want to do anything else, but you keep showing up. Occasionally it asks everything from you, but most of the time it just requires that you show up and you find ways to keep working despite um, all the doubt that's always there.
Well, thank you so much, Tommy. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So before we leave, we have a few items to give our distinguished lecturer. So we will start with something that Loren is going to give to Tommy.
Ocio, bienvenidos, welcome. It has been Anne's and my pleasure and privilege to have been part of the Center for Comparative Studies in Race and Ethnicity for some 22 years. It is hard to believe that this is the 20th year of the Anne and Loren Kieve Distinguished Lecture Series. Tommy Orange is a perfect example of the accomplished people in their fields that we have been honored to have as our speakers. One of our first speakers was another Native American and a friend, N. Scott Momaday, who, like Tommy Orange, was an acclaimed writer and teacher. Scott received his PhD in English from Stanford and taught English here as a distinguished professor. Scott's first novel, Housemaid of Dawn, was the first work of a Native American to win a Pulitzer Prize, and it inspired a wave of Native American literature. Tommy has done the same. Tommy has carried on that heritage. As you know, his first novel, There, was a finalist for the 2019 Pulitzer Prize. Paul has already given you all of his honors, so I'm not going to repeat them, although he is going to do it anyway. Anne and I are particularly proud of the fact that both Scott Momaday and Tommy Orange have taught at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where Tommy received his MFA in creative writing and now teaches that subject there. Side note, I gave him his degree. And is also where I have been privileged to be a trustee for 30 years as a U.S. presidential appointee. Like Scott Momaday, Tommy Orange's works, including his latest, Wandering Stars, as one commentator has put it, take for their subject matter those elusive perceptions about Native Americans that resist formulation, never entirely apprehensible, but just beyond the ends of our nerves. If you've not read his two novels, you owe it to yourselves to do so. Please join me in thanking and honoring Tommy Orange for joining us tonight.
So Tommy, we have a little plaque to give you to help you remember the occasion of coming to give the 20th annual Anne and Loren Kieve. So thank you very much.